When Jesus was on the cross, he was flanked on either side by two thieves who had their legs broken. But Jesus didn't have his legs broken. He was pierced in the side instead. Why was this? This was exactly what was meant to happen. Well, I'll explain. We are told to strip away church doctrine that's not based on Scripture. Jeremiah prophesies that the Gentiles will come from around the world and confess that they inherited lies, vanities, things with no profit. You think showing up for church each week and punching a time clock's going to do it? No, there's a lot more work than that.
God sent him to me.
I guess that could be true, but take your seat next to me in the pews. This is season 2. Let's go. Before we can understand what's going on with Jesus being pierced, we must first look at its event that happened prior. 2,000 years earlier, Abraham led Isaac to Mount Moriah, where he was going to sacrifice him because God told him to sacrifice his son. And when they were going, and Isaac had the wood on his back, and I'm going to read from Genesis 22 here, and this is how it puts it. And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering." So they went, both of them together. Now, Abraham would end up bringing up Isaac because Isaac was the intended sacrifice. And what he would do is he would stretch him out on the altar that they built, tied him down, and was going to pierce him with the knife. And God, angel of God, stopped him and said, "Stop." And then they found a ram caught in a thicket, which they used as the sacrifice. And that's going to lead into the repeat when Jesus comes. Okay, let's start with why the legs had to be not broken. And this goes back, and I'm going to read Numbers because it's important to understand this about Jesus was the Passover sacrifice. And let's see what Numbers has to say about the Passover sacrifice. And I'm going to read Numbers 9. "They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break any bones of it. According to all the ordinances of Passover, they shall keep it." So God specifically said to them, you cannot break the bones of a Passover lamb. So that's the first reason why Jesus's legs were not broken, because you can't do that. He would not be an acceptable Passover sacrifice, and that would destroy his mission. Jesus died on the 14th day of the first month in the afternoon, just like all the Passover lambs that were on the Temple Mount being sacrificed by the high priest. Now, Jesus had to be off the cross before sundown and in the tomb, the same way that the Passover lambs would be in the ovens. Now, here's what happens. When they came back, they had to make sure these people were dead before sundown because the Jews would freak, because they were told never to leave anybody on a cross or hanging at sundown. So they came and they broke the legs of the two thieves, so that they couldn't support themselves with their legs. They would more now hang. They would hang by their wrists and their hands, and the weight would stretch them out and they wouldn't be able to breathe. They'd be in a lot of pain and they would die quickly. But when they got to Jesus, he was already dead. But they could have broke his legs, just to see if he cried out in pain. That would have been a normal thing, but there's divine intervention here that he can't have his legs broken. So instead they took a spear and pierced his side, and out came blood and water. Now I just want to read John 19. "But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came out the blood and water." Now, in the next chapter, I'm going to talk about the significance of the blood and water and why he had to be pierced and the blood and water has to come out. So if you remember, Jesus was always the giver of life through water. Now let's read John 4, and he tells us about it. "But whosoever," this is Jesus talking here, "but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life." Now, Jesus is the well of the water. You got to remember, the Israelites, these were people that dwelled, in and around the deserts. So water is very important to a desert person. If we remember when the Israelites were taken out of Egypt and they were brought across the desert, when they got to Rephidim, if you remember the rock at Rephidim, Moses was told to take a staff and smote the rock, and out will come life-giving water. Now, that rock was a metaphor for Jesus, because if we remember when they went through the desert for the 40 years and they finally got to the desert in Zin, there was another rock, and Moses was told not to smite the rock, but he was told to declare the rock, to speak to the rock, and the water would come out. And this again was Jesus, but he, in his frustration, smacked the rock a couple times with his staff, and the water came out and made God angry, and that's why he couldn't go into the land himself. But these two rocks symbolize Jesus giving the life-giving water the first time he was hit and died, what we saw on the cross, and the second time he'll be declared by everybody, and he will give life-giving water. Okay, so now we know the importance of the water. What about the blood? Why is there water and blood? Why wasn't there just blood? Why wasn't there just water, whatever was in his stomach? Okay, let's talk about the blood now. The blood's very important. Now, if we remember that it's blood that is required to cleanse the land. So when the Canaanites defiled the land before the Jews ended up moving in, the land had to be cleansed from all their evil doings. They're passing the children through fire, all this. The land was defiled. And the only way to clean the land was by the blood of the Canaanites. So God told them that they have to kill everybody. They had to kill the men, the women, the children, the animals. It required all of their blood to be spilled to cleanse the land. Now, here's what's happening on the cross. It's Jesus's blood that's being spilled on the land to cleanse the Israelites from what they had done. They had broken the covenant at the mountain by making the golden calf. They broke the covenant. So they needed to pay this with their blood, but they didn't. They found another way. And now it comes down to actually paying it off so we could have a new covenant. And that requires Jesus's blood to hit the land, perfectly innocent lamb, his blood to hit the land to cleanse the land and allow for the new covenant. I just want to read Numbers 35 here, and it talks about this a little bit. So you shall not pollute the land wherein you are, for the blood it defiles the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So he's talking about killers here, but it's the same sort of thing. It really required, like I said, the Israelites' blood to cleanse this land, but Jesus stepped in and he took the sacrifice for them. He was their sacrifice once and for all. Let's bring this whole thing to a close. We know that Abraham and Isaac were going to Mount Moriah, the same place that Jesus was on the cross. We know that they were going there to sacrifice Abraham's son, and he was going to do it with a knife. He was going to pierce him with a knife. The same thing. And if you remember, Abraham famously said, when Isaac asked about the sacrifice, where's the sacrifice? And he said, God will provide a sacrifice, in which he did. 2,000 years later, he provided his own son as a sacrifice. And instead of Isaac getting pierced by the knife, Jesus was also pierced by the sword. So that kind of fulfills what Isaac and Abraham were doing. And now we know that the blood, it cleanses the land. Blood is required to cleanse the land to renew the covenant. If we remember Mary had to go to the Temple Mount after she gave birth to Jesus with 2 turtle doves that would be sacrificed for her purification. The Jews had to do this all the time. And Jesus' once and only sacrifice on the cross ended all that. And and just to review that, the water that came out of him, from Jesus, just like the 2 rocks, he is the giver of life-giving water, like he told the Samaritan at the well. Those that drink from his water will never thirst. So I think we got our hands around it. Let's see you next week.